The alien woman I saved in the war years ago has returned with her daughter. The war had ended 12 years ago, but it never truly left Elias Carter. On the surface, life on the frontier world of Kepri 9 looked peaceful. Wide red plains stretched under a pale blue sky. Human settlements stood quiet and organized, built with care and patience rather than pride. Ships came and went, carrying supplies, workers, and news from Earth and the inner colonies. To outsiders, it looked like humanity had recovered, but Elias knew better. He woke every morning before dawn, his body trained by years of survival. The nightmares still came sometimes, burning skies, broken cities, alien screams mixed with human voices. He never talked about the war, and no one asked. Most people here had their own scars. Elias worked as a maintenance engineer at the spaceport. It was simple work, honest work. He liked machines because they made sense. Machines did what they were designed to do. They did not hesitate. They did not beg. They did not remember. Humans, on the other hand, remembered everything. The interstellar war had been humanity's first contact with intelligent alien life, and it had nearly been their last. Humanity had entered the galactic stage unprepared, divided, and underestimated. Alien powers saw Earth as noisy, emotional, and inefficient. When conflict began, they assumed humans would break quickly. They were wrong about one thing. Humans did not break easily. They bent. They adapted. They survived. Still, the cost was terrible. Billions died. Entire colonies were lost. Humanity survived not because it was the strongest, but because it refused to disappear. When the war finally ended, the galaxy labeled humans as resilient but primitive, dangerous in chaos, harmless in peace. Elias had been a soldier during the worst years, a combat medic assigned to frontline units, patching wounds under fire, dragging the wounded from battlefields that never should have existed. He had followed orders, mostly. There was one day he could never forget. It had been on a shattered moon near the edge of known space. The fighting had been brutal and confused. Smoke filled the air and the ground was broken glass and metal. His unit had been ordered to retreat. Anyone left behind was considered lost. That was when he heard the sound. It was not human. A weak, broken cry barely louder than the crackling fires around him. He should have ignored it. The orders were clear: retreat or die. Instead, he followed the sound. He found her pinned under wreckage, bleeding from multiple wounds. Her body was tall and slender, her skin pale silver blue, her eyes wide with fear and pain. She was alien, an enemy, a soldier from the other side. They stared at each other in silence. Elias remembered raising his weapon. He remembered his hands shaking. He remembered thinking about all the friends he had lost, all the cities burned by alien fleets. He remembered hating her for existing. And then he remembered something else. She was alive, that was all. He lowered his weapon. Using tools meant for humans, he freed her from the wreckage. He treated her wounds the best he could, even though he barely understood her biology. She never attacked him. She never tried to escape. She simply watched him with confusion and disbelief. When his unit called again, he made a choice that changed everything. He left her hidden in a sheltered cave with medical supplies and a beacon tuned to civilian rescue channels. He never learned her name. He never learned her species. He assumed he would never see her again. The war swallowed that moment like it swallowed everything else. Now, 12 years later, Elias believed that memory belonged to a different life, until the day the ship arrived. It was late afternoon when the alert sounded at the spaceport. Elias looked up from a control panel, frowning. The incoming vessel was not on any scheduled route. It carried no visible weapons, no transponder marking it as military or civilian. That alone was strange. What was stranger was the request. The ship requested permission to land and asked specifically for Elias Carter by name. The spaceport director contacted him immediately, suspicion heavy in her voice. "Do you know anything about this?" Elias shook his head. "No, I've never owned a ship. Never left the system since the war." "Whoever they are, they know you," she said. "Security will be present." Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The ship descended slowly, gracefully, its surface smooth and organic in design. It landed without a sound. The air around it shimmered briefly, then settled. The hatch opened. Two figures stepped out. The first one made Elias stop breathing. She was taller than he remembered, or maybe he had been smaller back then, crushed under fear and exhaustion. Her posture was straight now, confident. Her clothing was elegant, marked with symbols he did not recognize. Her silver-blue skin was unscarred. Her eyes met his. Recognition passed between them like electricity. The second figure stood close beside her, holding her hand. A child, the girl was clearly alien, sharing her mother's features but softer, younger. Her eyes were bright, curious rather than afraid. She looked at Elias as if he were a story come to life. Security raised their weapons. The alien woman lifted one hand slowly, a universal gesture of peace. Her voice came through a translator field, calm and clear. I come unarmed, I come in gratitude, and I come because a debt remains unpaid. Elias stepped forward before he realized what he was doing. It's her, he said quietly. The director looked at him sharply. You know this alien? I saved her, Elias said, during the war. Silence fell over the landing field. The woman inclined her head slightly. That is correct. I survived because he chose mercy when he did not have to. The child looked up at Elias with wide eyes. You are the human, she said, her voice careful but steady. The one from my mother's stories. Elias swallowed. His mouth felt dry. I didn't do much, he said. I just didn't leave her to die. The woman's eyes softened. In our culture, she said, that choice outweighs victories, treaties, and fleets. They were escorted inside, away from the growing crowd. In a secure meeting room, the woman finally spoke again. My name is Seelan, she said. I am of the Thryxian Conquered. During the war, I served as a strategic observer. Elias frowned. An observer, she nodded. Your war was studied. Humanity was studied, not openly, but carefully. That did not sit well with him. My daughter, Seelan continued, resting a hand on the child's shoulder, is named Tira. Tira smiled slightly at Elias. I wanted to meet you, she said. You are important. Elias let out a short, humorless breath. I'm really not. Seelan met his gaze. You are far more important than you realize. She explained that after the war, the galaxy did not relax. Many species feared humanity's potential. Humans had lost and still survived. Worse, they had adapted faster under pressure than most ancient civilizations had in centuries. Fear grew quietly. Seelan's people, bound by ancient laws of balance, began observing humanity more closely, not as enemies, as a question. Are humans a threat, she said, or are they something new? Tira spoke next, her tone serious despite her age. My education includes the war, she said. All wars, yours is unique. Elias leaned back uneasy. Why come to me? Seelan's expression grew grave. Because the galaxy stands on the edge of a mistake, and it began the day you saved my life. Outside the room, the stars burned cold and distant. Elias felt the weight of 12 years crash down on him all at once. He had thought that moment in the cave was forgotten, meaningless in the vast scale of war. He had been wrong. The past had not only survived. It had returned. The room felt smaller the longer Seelan spoke. Elias sat across from her, his hands resting on the table, fingers locked together. Tira sat beside her mother, feet not touching the floor, watching everything with careful attention. Human security officers stood near the walls, alert but uncertain. None of them had expected a peaceful alien visitor to arrive asking for one specific human by name. Seelan folded her hands calmly. I understand your discomfort, she said. If our positions were reversed, I would feel the same. Elias nodded once. You said the galaxy is about to make a mistake, he replied. I don't like how that sounds. You should not, Seelan said, because that mistake may end your species without a single shot fired. That got everyone's attention. The spaceport director leaned forward. Explain. Seelan looked at Elias again, as if she trusted him more than the others. After the war, humanity was classified as a recovering species, she said. Limited expansion rights. Restricted military development, economic supervision under the name of protection. Elias frowned. We knew about the restrictions, we didn't know they were that detailed. They were meant to slow you, Seelan said simply. Not to help you. Silence followed. Tira broke it. Many species were afraid, she said. You fought without unity, without experience, and still you did not disappear. Elias felt something twist in his chest. We lost almost everything. Yes, Tira said, and yet you kept going. That confused them. Seelan continued. Fear grows quietly in the galaxy. Ancient civilizations prefer patterns, predictable enemies. Humanity does not fit any known model. Elias leaned back, rubbing his temples. So what's the plan? Another war? No, Seelan said. Something far more effective. She tapped the table lightly and a soft projection appeared above it. Symbols, lines, and translated text filled the air. A program called the Stabilization Accord, she said. On the surface, it is peace, trade access, technological assistance, cultural exchange. The director nodded slowly. That doesn't sound hostile. It is not meant to sound hostile, Seelan replied. Over time, the Accord restricts human innovation, limits independent research, and places non-human oversight on your colonies. Your population remains alive, productive, and harmless. Elias stared at the projection. You're describing a cage. Yes, Seelan said, a very comfortable one. Tira's voice was quiet but firm. Some call it mercy. Elias clenched his jaw, and if we refuse. Seelan's eyes darkened. Then humanity becomes unstable, a risk, and risks are removed. The words settled heavily in the room. The director exhaled slowly. Why come to us now? Because the Accord is days from being finalized, Seelan said. And because my people have influence, but not enough without cause. Elias looked at her sharply. Cause, she met his gaze without hesitation. A life debt. Human officers exchanged looks. In Thryxian law, Seelan explained, a life saved creates an unbreakable bond. The one who was saved and their bloodline are bound to protect the savior and what they represent. Elias shook his head slightly. I didn't save your people, I saved you. Seelan smiled faintly. You saved the question my people were asking. Whether humans were only survivors or something more. Tira looked directly at him. My mother told me your story every year, she said, not as a legend, as evidence. Evidence of what? Elias asked. That humans make dangerous choices, Tira replied. Because they choose with their hearts, not just their survival. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet settlement, stars bright above him. The war had taken his faith in grand causes. He trusted actions, not speeches. And yet the galaxy had turned his smallest action into something vast. Seelan's words echoed in his mind. A comfortable cage. By morning, Earth had been informed. Meetings followed. Secure calls, long debates filled with caution and old trauma. Humanity had rebuilt by avoiding attention. Now attention had found them anyway. Elias was asked to speak. He stood in front of a projection of human leaders from multiple systems. Generals, scientists, civilians, people who had lost more than history books would ever record. I'm not a politician, Elias said. I'm not a hero. I did one thing during the war that felt right. He told them everything. The cave, the wounded alien, the choice. I didn't save her because she was important, he said. I saved her because she was alive. The room stayed silent. A woman from Earth finally spoke. And now, Elias met her eyes. Now the galaxy thinks that choice means something. Days passed quickly. Alien envoys arrived, polite, smiling. Their words were friendly, their intentions carefully hidden behind cooperation. The stabilization accord was presented as an honor. Seelan and Tira remained on Kepri 9, officially as observers. Unofficially, they watched everything. They don't understand you, Tira said one evening as she and Elias sat outside, watching ships pass overhead. That's not new, Elias replied. They think your strength comes from desperation, she continued. They think once you feel safe, you will become weak. Elias snorted softly. That's when humans get dangerous, Tira smiled. Exactly. Behind closed doors, humanity prepared not fleets, not weapons, plans, redundant systems, civilian-led innovation, quiet alliances with smaller species who feared the Accord as much as humans did. Humans shared knowledge freely without demands. It confused the observers. Seelan watched with growing respect. You rebuild like a living organism, she said. Cut one part, another adapts. We had to, Elias said. No one was coming to save us. She looked at him thoughtfully. Except you saved me, he shrugged. That was just one person, Seelan's voice softened. One person is how everything starts. The day of the final accord arrived. A massive diplomatic station lit the stars, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Humanity arrived not as beggars, but not as threats either. Elias stood beside Seelan and Tira as observers. He felt small and very human among beings who measured time in centuries. The lead envoy spoke. Humanity has been offered protection, stability, and peace. Elias listened as the conditions were explained again. Restrictions, oversight, compliance. Then Seelan stepped forward. My people invoke a life debt, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. We cannot allow this accord to proceed as written. Murmurs spread instantly. This is unprecedented, another envoy snapped. So was the war, Seelan replied calmly. So was humanity's survival. Tira stepped forward next. I am trained to see patterns, she said. Every simulation that restricts humanity ends the same way. Resistance, collapse, violence. She lifted her gaze. The only future where humanity does not become your enemy is one where you treat them as equals. Silence followed. Elias felt his heart pound. The galaxy was listening, and for the first time since the war, humanity was not being judged by its weapons, but by one act of mercy that refused to stay buried in the past. The diplomatic chamber did not erupt into chaos. That surprised many. Instead, it grew quiet in a way that felt heavy, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. Representatives from dozens of species sat frozen, their expressions carefully controlled. Some showed irritation, others showed fear. A few showed something close to curiosity. Humanity's delegation remained calm, but inside, tension burned like a live wire. Elias stood still beside Seelan and Tira. He had never imagined that a moment from a battlefield long ago would echo here, among stars and powers that could decide the fate of entire species. The lead envoy finally spoke again, his voice smooth but cold. "A life debt does not override galactic stability." Seelan turned toward him slowly. "In your law, perhaps, in ours it does. And your law does not rule this chamber," another envoy added. Tira looked up at them. Her voice was young, but it carried clearly. "Then you should ask why so many of your laws failed to predict humanity." That caused a ripple of quiet reactions. One envoy leaned forward. "Explain." Tira nodded once. "You studied humans as survivors of disaster. You measured their technology, their population, their losses. You assumed their strength came from fear." She paused, letting the translator keep pace. "You were wrong." Elias felt every eye shift toward the small alien child. Tira continued. "Human strength comes from connection, from shared pain. From the refusal to abandon each other, even when it makes no sense." A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. "You do not fear humans because they are violent," Tira said. "You fear them because they are unpredictable." Silence returned. Seelan stepped in again. "My people ran simulations for years," she said. "Every future where humanity was controlled ended in collapse, not because humans rebel immediately, but because they adapt around the control." "Slowly," Elias added quietly. "Then all at once." Some envoys turned sharply toward him, annoyed that a single human dared to speak, but others listened. "Humanity has already begun preparing," Seelan said. "Not for war, for survival." A tall, crystalline envoy let out a sharp tone. "That sounds like a threat." Elias shook his head. "It's a promise to ourselves." The chamber recessed without a vote. That, too, was unusual. In the private hours that followed, pressure began. Trade offers arrived for human corporations, generous ones if they agreed to support the stabilization accord. Quiet warnings followed, travel restrictions, delays, inspections that lasted just long enough to hurt. Humanity did not respond with anger, they responded with patience. On Kepri 9, Elias watched it unfold through reports and briefings. The humans were doing what they always did best, talking, sharing, coordinating across borders that had once divided them. "Your species is very loud when threatened," Tira observed as they watched a stream of human debate feeds. Elias smiled faintly. "That's how we think." "But your leaders do not fracture," she noted. "That is unusual." "They learned," Elias said. "The war punished us for division." Seelan watched quietly. "You became stronger by failing." "Yeah," Elias replied. "We do that a lot." Behind the scenes, smaller alien species began reaching out to humans. Not openly, carefully, they asked questions, requested data, shared concerns. The stabilization accord was not just about humans, it was about control. Humans understood that. Instead of demanding loyalty, they offered cooperation, shared medical advancements, open-source engineering solutions, agricultural systems that worked on harsh worlds. No conditions. That frightened the major powers far more than weapons ever could. "They don't know how to respond," Seelan said during a secure meeting. "You offer value without dominance." Elias shrugged. "That's how we survived each other." The second session of negotiations began under tension. This time the chamber was fuller, more observers. More watchers, the lead envoy spoke sharply. "Humanity is accused of destabilizing influence." Elias raised an eyebrow. "By helping people? By spreading unregulated development," the envoy snapped. Tira tilted her head. "You mean hope?" That word echoed longer than expected. A new figure stood then, an envoy from a minor species. Small, soft-spoken, rarely heard. "We support humanity's position," they said quietly. "The accord threatens us as well." Another voice followed, then another. The chamber began to shift. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. This was bigger than him now, bigger than one life saved. Seelan leaned toward him. This is the moment they feared. Us standing together? Elias asked. No, she replied. You choosing not to dominate. The major powers attempted to regain control. New proposals were introduced. Modified accords, softer language. Humans read every word carefully. It still cages us, one human diplomat said calmly. The talk stretched on. Then came the breaking point. A classified report was leaked, not by humans, by someone afraid. The report detailed contingency plans. If humanity refused the accord, trade routes would close, medical shipments would slow, artificial shortages would appear, pressure without violence, a silent war. The chamber exploded into outrage. Seelan's eyes hardened. You said peace. The lead envoy did not deny it. Peace requires sacrifice. Elias stepped forward before protocol could stop him. Then start with yourselves, he said. Gasps followed. Elias felt fear, but also clarity. You think we don't recognize slow extinction, he continued. We lived it, we crawled through it, and we came out the other side. He met the envoy's gaze. You don't scare us with patience, we invented it. The chamber erupted into debate. And then Tira did something no one expected. She deactivated the translator for a moment, then reactivated it. I have authorization to release Thryxian predictive data, she said. Seelan turned sharply. Tira, I know, Tira replied gently. It's time. The projection filled the chamber. Simulations, hundreds of futures. In nearly everyone where humanity was controlled, the galaxy burned within centuries. Not because humans sought revenge, but because innovation died, stagnation spread, and ancient powers collapsed under their own weight. In the few futures where humanity was treated as an equal, something else happened. The galaxy stabilized. Growth continued. Conflict decreased. The chamber fell silent. You are afraid of humanity because they remind you of yourselves, Tira said softly, what you once were before you stopped changing. Elias felt chills. The lead envoy's voice was strained. This data could be manipulated. Seelan shook her head. We gain nothing by lying except survival. The vote was postponed again, but the tone had changed. That night Elias stood alone near the viewport, watching stars drift by. He felt small. Human, tired, Seelan joined him. You never wanted this, she said. No, he admitted. I just wanted to save someone, she smiled faintly. That is why it matters. Tira approached next. My people call you a pivot, she said. Elias laughed quietly. We just call that bad timing. Tira smiled back. The galaxy is learning something important. What's that? Elias asked. That humanity does not need permission to matter. Outside, fleets adjusted their orbits. Messages flew faster than light. Old assumptions cracked. The future was no longer quiet. And the galaxy was beginning to understand that the most dangerous thing about humans was not their weapons, or their numbers, or even their resilience. It was that once they chose to stand together, they did not step back. The galaxy did not collapse after the data was revealed. That surprised everyone. For centuries, the great powers had believed that stability came from control. That fear had to be managed quietly, gently, with rules that only benefited those already strong. Humanity's refusal to accept the cage had threatened that belief. But instead of chaos, something else happened. Questions spread. Worlds that had never spoken during galactic sessions began to speak. Minor species requested access to the same data Tira had shown. Observers demanded explanations. Even some major powers began internal reviews, afraid of what their own people might learn. The Stabilization Accord was no longer a quiet document moving smoothly toward approval. It had become public, debated, and unstable. Elias watched this unfold from Kepri 9, surrounded by people who were calm on the surface and burning with focus beneath it. Humans had not declared victory. They had not celebrated. They prepared instead, because humans knew something the galaxy was still learning. When systems built on fear begin to crack, they do not fall cleanly, they push back. The pressure came first as economics. Trade lanes slowed. Supply shipments were delayed. Inspections multiplied. It was all legal, all polite, all painful. Human colonies felt it within weeks. Food prices rose. Medical supplies grew scarce on the outer worlds. Civilian frustration climbed. The pressure was designed to make humanity turn inward to blame itself for refusing protection. It almost worked. Almost. Instead of demanding retaliation, human leadership did something strange. They opened everything: resource maps, manufacturing designs, farming techniques optimized during the war, emergency medical procedures developed under fire. All shared freely with human colonies and with any alien world willing to cooperate. No payment required, no loyalty demanded. Seelan watched the data traffic with disbelief. You are giving away advantages other species would kill to protect. Elias nodded. We learned something in the war: hoarded strength breaks, shared strength multiplies. That philosophy terrifies them, she said quietly. Good, Elias replied. It should. Tira spent long hours communicating with young representatives from other species. She explained human systems in simple terms: decentralization, redundancy, trust networks instead of rigid hierarchies. You don't need to become human, she told them. You just need to stop pretending change is death. The major powers noticed. A closed session was called. This time humanity was not invited as a participant. They were summoned as a subject. The chamber was tense when Elias, Seelan, and Tira entered. Guards stood closer than before. The tone was sharper, less polite. The lead envoy spoke first. Humanity's actions are destabilizing the balance. Elias crossed his arms. The balance was already broken. We just stopped pretending it was. You are encouraging defiance, another envoy snapped. No, Seelan replied calmly. You are witnessing it. A massive projection appeared, fleet movements, patrol routes, enforcement forces quietly repositioning near human space. This is not an attack, the envoy said quickly. It is precaution. Elias stared at the display. You're surrounding civilians. Protection, the envoy insisted. Tira stepped forward. You do not protect something by threatening it. The room filled with low, uneasy sounds from different species. Elias felt anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. Let me ask you something. If we sign your accord today, do these fleets leave? The lead envoy hesitated, just long enough. Elias nodded. That's what I thought. Human leadership did not order mobilization. They ordered transparency. Every fleet movement was made public, every delay documented. Every restriction explained in plain language to the human population and shared openly with other species. This isn't a military response, a human analyst said during a broadcast. It's accountability. The effect was immediate. Civil unrest did not erupt on human worlds. Instead, people organized. Volunteers filled supply gaps. Local manufacturing replaced delayed imports. Communities adapted faster than expected. Seelan watched in awe. They do not panic. No, Elias said. We already did that once. It didn't help. The galaxy expected fear. What it got was resilience without aggression. Then came the test. A medical shipment bound for a human outer colony was stopped for inspection. The delay stretched too long. Lives were at risk. Human leadership requested immediate release. The response was slow, too slow. Elias felt his chest tighten as reports came in. If they let people die to make a point, they will lose everything, Seelan finished quietly. Humanity acted within hours, not with force, with proof. Human ships rerouted using civilian lanes. Emergency manufacturing facilities activated across multiple systems. Medical equipment was produced locally using shared designs and delivered by independent operators, including non-human allies. The shipment arrived in time. Every step was recorded, broadcast, verified. The narrative shifted. The galaxy saw clearly who had tried to apply pressure and who had quietly saved lives. That moment broke something. The next session was chaotic. Accusations flew, justifications failed. Minor species openly challenged the major powers for the first time in centuries. You said this was peace, one envoy said bitterly. This looks like control. The lead envoy's authority weakened visibly. Seelan stood tall. Humanity has demonstrated restraint under threat. That restraint is strength. Elias spoke again, his voice carrying exhaustion and resolve. We don't want dominance, we want room to breathe. The chamber fell quiet. A vote was called, not on the original accord, on a revision, restrictions removed, oversight made voluntary. Equal representation guaranteed. It was not perfect, but it was real. The major powers resisted, some walked out, others stayed, calculating. The revised accord passed by a narrow margin. Humanity was no longer caged, but the story was not over. Outside official chambers, resentment brewed. Not everyone accepted the change. Some species had built their identity on being eternal guardians of order. They were losing that role. Seelan received warnings from her people. There are whispers, she told Elias. Groups that believe humanity must still be corrected. Elias exhaled slowly. Of course there are. Tira looked up at him. They are afraid of what comes next. What does come next? Elias asked. She smiled faintly. A galaxy that cannot pretend humans are temporary. The fleets near human space began to withdraw. Slowly, carefully, the pressure eased, but Elias knew better than to relax. The war had taught him this much. Peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the presence of choice. Humanity had chosen not to kneel. And now the galaxy had to decide whether it could live with that. As stars shifted and alliances adjusted, one truth became impossible to deny. Humans had not won by force. They had won by refusing to become what the galaxy feared. And that refusal had changed everything. The galaxy did not celebrate the revised accord. That, too, surprised many. There were no grand declarations of unity, no fireworks across the stars. Instead, there was a long, careful silence, the kind that follows a storm when everyone steps outside to see what is still standing. Human space felt that silence first. Trade resumed slowly. Fleets withdrew to respectful distances. Inspections became normal again, not weapons disguised as rules. The pressure eased, but humanity did not relax. They had learned that survival was not about comfort. It was about awareness. Elias returned to his routine on Kepri 9. He fixed docking clamps, calibrated landing systems, walked the same paths each morning. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary human again. But the galaxy knew better now. Messages came from places Elias had never heard of, small worlds, fragile civilizations. Species that had lived quietly under larger shadows. They thanked humanity, not for power, but for proof that standing without dominance was possible. Elias never replied to most of them. He did not know what to say. Seelan remained on Kepri 9 longer than planned. Officially, she was an ambassador helping stabilize relations. Unofficially, she was watching history change in ways her people had never predicted. "You are uncomfortable with being important," she said one evening as they watched the sky darken. "I'm uncomfortable with being watched," Elias replied. She smiled faintly. "The galaxy watches storms, not stones." "That doesn't help," he said. Tira sat nearby, older now in posture if not in years. She spent her days speaking with representatives across the stars. She had become something new, part observer, part bridge. "My people have updated our records," she said. "Humanity is no longer listed as a risk factor." Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's good, right?" She tilted her head. "You are now listed as a variable." Seelan laughed softly. "That is far worse for those who fear uncertainty." The final challenge came quietly. No fleets, no threats, a proposal. A coalition of major powers requested a formal alliance with humanity, equal status, shared defense, shared authority. It was framed as respect. Human leadership debated for days. Elias was asked to observe, not speak. The offer was tempting: security, influence, a seat at every table. But beneath the language, humans saw the risk. Alliances had a way of turning equals into tools. At the end of the session, humanity declined. They offered cooperation instead. Open trade, mutual aid, crisis response. No permanent chains. The coalition did not hide its disappointment. Some called humanity foolish. Others called them arrogant. Tira watched the reactions with calm certainty. "They still think power must be owned," Elias nodded. "We learned it only needs to be shared." That decision settled the last doubts. The galaxy adjusted. Years passed. Humanity grew not outward in conquest, but inward in depth. Their colonies became centers of mixed species cooperation. Human systems turned into crossroads rather than fortresses. Innovation spread faster than control ever could. Some species resisted the change. A few isolated themselves. History recorded their decline quietly. Most adapted, Seelan prepared to leave at last. Her ship stood ready at the spaceport, sleek and calm beneath the stars. Elias walked with her and Tira toward the ramp. The air was cool. The moment felt heavier than he expected. "My people will remember this era," Seelan said. "Not because of treaties, because of a pattern break." Elias frowned. "I still don't understand how one decision mattered this much." She stopped and faced him. "Because it was made when no one was watching." Tira stepped forward. She held out a small object, smooth and warm to the touch. "A Thryxian marker," she said. "It records truths that do not fit into data." Elias hesitated, then accepted it. "I don't deserve this." Tira smiled gently. "That is why you do." Seelan inclined her head deeply. "My life debt is fulfilled, but my respect remains." Elias felt something tighten in his chest. "Take care of her," he said quietly. "I will," Seelan replied, "and she will take care of others." They boarded the ship. As it lifted into the sky, Elias stood alone on the landing field, watching until it vanished among the stars. He expected to feel empty. Instead, he felt finished, not complete, but at peace. Years later, history would record the turning point differently. Some would say it was the leaked report, others the revised accord. Some would credit human strategy or alien data or political shifts. A few would tell a quieter story, of a battlefield long ago, of a wounded alien pinned beneath wreckage, of a human medic who lowered his weapon because leaving someone to die felt wrong. They would say that was the moment the galaxy changed direction. Elias never read those histories. He continued his work, helped new arrivals, fixed broken things, lived a life that did not seek meaning but offered it freely when needed. Sometimes children, human and alien alike, would visit the spaceport. They would look at him with curiosity, having heard stories passed down through schools and networks. "Is it true?" they would ask. "Did you save the galaxy?" Elias would shake his head. "No. What did you do then?" He would think for a moment, then answer honestly. "I saved one person, and that was enough." Far beyond Kepri 9, in halls of learning and chambers of power, humanity's name was no longer spoken with fear or pity. It was spoken with respect, not because humans were the strongest, not because they were the oldest or the wisest, but because when the galaxy tried to decide what humans were, humanity chose for itself, and the stars learned to live with that choice.